Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, and in this video we're going to look at 3 macros that can save you a lot of time and effort in Excel. You can download a file that contains these 3 macros from the In the Black website. I'd like to start by saying that macros in Excel are not dead. There are a lot of social media posts saying that macros are now not required because of Power Query. So just a heads up, Power Query is great. I use it all the time, but it only handles data. And so it does replace a lot of macros that people wrote to handle data, but that's it. Power Query only handles data. Macros handle everything in Excel. So they are really, really powerful. They can save you a lot of time. They can automate a lot of processes, which makes delegation a lot easier. Macros are not dead. They are very much alive, and they are very much a productivity tool in Excel. Before I start, I've got to go through the macro warning, because when you run a macro, it clears Excel's undo list, which means 2 things. 1, whatever the macro did can't be undone, and also anything you did before you ran the macro, that can't be undone either. So just a heads up on that. So as a precaution, good idea to save the file before you run the macro. Then if something goes wrong, you can just close the file and not save it. Another option is to use a copy of the file. The shortcut key, function key F12, is a shortcut for save as. So I use that a lot. So you can save the file as another name, test it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you can just get rid of that file. So that's the warning out of the way. Now let's see all the good stuff that macros can do. So the first macro we're going to look at is going to solve a problem with pivot tables. Now, pivot tables are great. They're the easiest way to summarize data, but they have 2 niggling problems. The first you can see is there's no formatting on the numbers here. So there's no comma, it's showing decimals. In general, you don't show decimals in a pivot table report. And the other one is a terminology in the headings. It says sum of, which is accurate. It is summing things, but for presentation purposes, often you don't want to have that sum of in the heading. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that you can go into a heading and get rid of sum of. Now, I'm going to show you the error that if you try this. So when I hit enter, you can't name a column in the report the same as the column in the data. So the data has a margin column. But what you can do is put a space on the end. Okay, so there's a space on the end, and Excel will accept that. So that's what the macro is going to do. So it's going to fix our problem here with the sum of, and at the same time, it's going to add the comma and no decimals format to the pivot table. So I'm going to make a copy of this sheet so we can sort of see the before and after. Quick way to do that is to click and hold on the sheet tab name, and you get this little document symbol. Hold the control key down and then just release the mouse. I moved over slightly to the right, so it positioned it there. Now I'm going to call this one pivot after. So that's made an exact copy of the whole sheet, in this case the pivot table. And so now we're going to apply this macro to this particular pivot table. Let's go have a look at the macro. Now the macro is in what's called the VBA window. To get to it, you can press Alt F11. I've got it off to the side here, which I'll bring it in. And this is the macro. So it fixes the pivot fields. It mentions the what it does at the top here. So what we can do is I can just click inside this macro, and there's a little triangle, which is like play on the old video recorders. And we can hit play there, and that's going to run on the whatever cell I'm in is in. The cell needs to be inside the pivot table. So we're going to work with this particular cell. In this case, it can be any cell there. Let's go back there, Alt F11. Click here, and I'm going to click play. You can also press the F5 function key to run a macro. And there we go. As you can see, they're really, really fast. So if I move it over here, you can see it's got rid of the sum of out of the headings, and all of the numbers are formatted correctly as we want. Okay, so let's review the macro. It uses variable names. So we've got a PT, which represents a pivot table, and a PF, which represents the pivot field in the table. Some of the code may cause an error, so I've used this line of code, which means just keep going if an error is encountered. Don't overuse this one because you can create some problems, but in this case it doesn't cause any issues. So we capture the current pivot table based on the active sheet and the active cell. We can use that variable name throughout the rest of the code. So if you select a cell that isn't in the pivot table, let's do that. So I'll click a cell out here, so that's not in the pivot table. Now if I run the macro, you'll see we get a little dialog box pop up saying please select a cell within a pivot table. So click OK. And that's what this bit is doing. This part is displaying that message box. You can see you can design the message box fairly well. I have done an article and a video on message boxes. So that's the message. This is the button and also the icon, and then this is the heading. And then I've gone to a section of the code called handled exit, which takes you to a label that you can see below. Once we get past this, then we must have selected a cell within a pivot table, and so we're going to go through every pivot field. We're going to change the caption to the source name and a space, and then we just apply the format for the comma and no decimals. And so it loops through all of the fields, does that. At the end, I'm resetting the error handling. When you use the on error resume next, you should pretty much always use on error go to 0. That's another programming term to reset the error handling. And then at the bottom, I've set my two variables to nothing, which is just sort of good housekeeping. So you clear the variables out of the memory. So that is the macro. Now this is not a recorded macro, this is a written macro. There's sort of two types of macros. A recorded macro is very sequential, it goes from top to bottom. This particular macro here has been written, and so it has looping, it has the if statement, and it has variables. This is sort of a more advanced than a recorded macro. And it also can handle errors and things like that. Let's now have a look at the next macro. It's a similar issue. In the current version of Excel, when you use a spill range, so a lot of my recent articles have covered spill ranges, and I've mentioned in those articles that the format doesn't spill with the formula. So I've got a single formula in cell B2, it's spilling down and across to populate the range, so it's really, really powerful. It's like a pivot table. It's a single formula that's doing that, but it doesn't spill the format. So I've applied the format to cell B2, but as you can see, all of the other cells don't have that format. And so I've created a macro. You don't even have to click the top cell. You can just select any cell within the spill range, and it will apply the top left cell format to the rest of that range. So it saves you a lot of manually selecting the range to apply the same format. So let's have a look at that macro. That's the spill format. Again, it's I should mention all of the green text is what's called a comment. So it's describing what's happening, so explaining what's happening. So the green text doesn't do anything. This is the macro. So you need to be in a spill range. Let's click here and I'll make a copy of it first. Let's do that. So I'll make a copy of the sheet. Same deal. Drag across with the mouse, hold the control key, release the mouse, and that makes a copy. And I'll call this one after. Okay, so click, again, I'll click anywhere in the spill range. And let's run this macro. Let's have a look. And there we go. So that's formatted the whole range based on that top left cell, which is a lot easier for you to do than select the range manually and then apply the format. If the spill range did change, you would need to rerun the macro to apply the formula if it did expand. Let's have a look at the code for that. Excel's macros do identify spill ranges. It uses this has spill option to identify that. And then if it didn't, let's click outside. Again, I've got a message box here. So if I was out here and try that macro, Again, I get my error message. Please select a cell within a spill range before using this macro. And that's this section down the bottom. So in the first macro, it happened at the top. In the second macro, I'm doing it down the bottom because if it doesn't have a spill range, it's going to run this message box here. And so basically with that active cell, we're going to use the spill parent reference, which refers to the top left cell in the spill range. Copy it and then use paste special formats to paste that to the rest of the range. This statement here clears the clipboard. So just in case when you come back, if someone goes Control V, you might actually paste something. So by using this cut copy mode equals false, it clears the clipboard when the macro returns. Okay, so that is fixing that format. Now, we've got a few sheets in our file now, so we might want to create an index sheet that has hyperlinks. So I've written a macro to do that as well. So let's have a look at that one. Here it is. This one's a lot more complex. I won't go into a lot of detail about this one. I'll just take you through it generally. But if I run this macro now, there we go. I now have an index sheet at the front here. I'll zoom in. So these are all of the sheets in the file. In this list, they are in sequence by name. So I've sorted it by name. In this list, it's in sequence as they appear in the file. So the data is last and the macro index is first. This one's showing first because I've used the underscore character in the name. So index could be a common sheet name. So rather than just use index, I'm using underscore index underscore. So hopefully that's unique enough. Now, if it already exists, so let's make a copy of something just so we can see that there's a new one. I'll make a copy of this spill after. It's got the number 2 there. So if I run that again, the index sheet already exists, so it recognizes that and it just updates the ones that are there. So I can go here and run it again. Now, when it identifies that it already exists, it does ask you the question, do you want to overwrite the entries? And so I'm going to say yes. And so we can go back here now and we've got spill after 2 in there as well. If there is a sheet, if someone has named a sheet underscore index underscore, it is going to bring up that dialog just to confirm that it's going to be overwritten. It is checking, it doesn't just overwrite, it will check with the user before it overwrites. That's another advantage with writing macros rather than recording macros. Recording macros can't interact with the user, so as you can see, it's a lot more flexible than just recording a macro. I'll just show you these links work. So if I want to go to the macro sheet, quick tip to go back to where you were after you followed a hyperlink, just press the F5 key and press enter. So as we can see, these hyperlinks are working. And that's what the data looks like that the reports are based on. I'll quickly go through that particular macro. I'm using a lot of variables at the top here, so all of these variables are defined at the top. That's what the dim statement stands for. On error resume next, I've used that again. This line could cause an error because I'm trying to capture the index sheet in the WS index variable, and if it doesn't exist, that will cause an error. Now, if it exists, great, it'll work. If it doesn't exist, it'll actually throw out an error. And so what I'm doing here is checking for that error. And if there is an error, if the sheet doesn't exist, that means I've got to create it. And so that's what this does. If it does exist, then I do want to confirm with the user with this message box that it's okay to overwrite the existing index. Now I've got an error handler. Now that I've got through the error bit, I'm using an error handler. So that's down the bottom here. Basically the error handler is only displaying a message and then going to the handle exit routine. And all of this basically just goes through and finds and updates the names and creates a hyperlink. And then once it's done that, it sorts the hyperlink as well. And then I've just put some headings at the top and just made the columns auto fit. Now, if you're new to macros, this is probably all Greek to you, but I did want to take you through some macros that are not recorded. Most people sort of look at recorded macros, and as I mentioned, recorded macros have a lot of limitations, but when you write macros from scratch, you can sort of get rid of all those limitations. And so these macros here, as you can see, they interact with the user, and they perform a lot of tasks that normally take a lot of effort to do, and they're basically removing the manual process and capturing it, making the task a lot easier. Now, running these macros. So this window is sort of in the background of Excel, and now these macros are macros that you'd run on any file. So any file with a pivot table, any file with a spill range, any file that you want to put an index sheet on. So they're general macros. Now, general macros tend to be saved in what's called the personal macro workbook, which is called personal. Now, what that allows you to do is have the macros available all the time, because the personal macro workbook opens when Excel opens. So this is where you need to save it. Now, you might not have a personal macro workbook, so you'll need to record a macro, and then that will create your personal macro workbook. Okay, so I'll just create a macro and show you how to do that. So the easy way to record a macro is click under View, click the drop down for macros on the far right, and go Record Macro. You can just leave the name as Macro 1. Now, the important thing to do is to change it to Personal Macro Workbook. That's there, and click OK. And then maybe just apply bold, something like that, to whatever you've selected. If we go back on the drop here, we can click Stop Recording. And that's it. You've created your personal macro workbook. You will need to save it when you get out of Excel. Excel will ask you to save it. It's a hidden file. So the file's open in the background, but it's hidden. So now that we have created the personal macro workbook, we can, and you only need to do that once you've got your personal macro workbook, it's there forever. Once we've created it, we can now go back to our VBA window, and we can copy this module. So this is where the macros are. I'm just going to drag it to the personal macro module section. There it is. And so now that's ready to go. That's all you need to do. And those 3 macros are now in the personal macro workbook. And let's minimize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the quick access toolbar and choose Customize. I'm going to click the drop down here and select macros. And I don't want to use these top 2 ones because they are within the file. The problem with that is you need to have this file open. Now, you don't want to use the file to link to a quick access toolbar icon. You want to use personal because that's always open. Let's say I want to find this Fix Pivot Fields. Fixed Pivot Fields, there it is. I'm going to add. So it puts it at the bottom here. This is the macro. I'm going to modify it. I'll get rid of the personal in front of it, and you can put spaces in here. And let's pick an icon. I'll just choose this one randomly. Click OK. And Fix Pivot Fields is there now, so I can click OK. And so that's this icon on the end. I've already used it here, but there it is there. And what we're going to do is, where's our pivot? There's our before pivot. I'll make another copy of that. And now we can run this macro off the button. And so it's a lot easier and quicker. That makes applying the macro very quick and easy. And you just do that same process for the other macros. Just choose an icon and update the description. So 3 macros that can save you some time and effort, and they also showcase that macros can interact with the user, and they can do some fairly complex tasks, as we saw, creating an index sheet and sorting it as well. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.